Hi folks, welcome to Unite Planet with myself, Andy Chaplin, and Neil Geddes Ward. Neil, how you been?
I'm fine, Andy. How are you?
Bored as usual, but not too bad. I'm looking forward to today's guest. It's quite an interest of mine, actually, this one.
Well, not too far down the road from you, I believe.
No, literally
Enfield.
20 minutes down the road.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think my mum went to school in the vicinity. It's kind of the Brimsdown Enfield area. So, yeah, I know it well.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll get straight into it then. So, welcome to Enfield's very own psychical GP, which is Dr. Ian Rubenstein. Welcome
Hello.
to the show.
Good evening.
Thank
Good
you.
to be
Nice
here.
to have you here. How
I'm
are
very
you?
happy to be here.
You're
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah, good. Rested. Looking forward to the chat.
Good stuff.
It's an interesting subject of mine. I feel it's part of the folklore of the area where I've worked for better part of 36, 37 years.
Okay, so we know a little bit about you, Ian, because obviously, as Andy said, you did a talk for us at the High Wycombe Paranormal Meetup Group about 4 years ago, and we've also done interviews with Mark and Irene of the Paranormal UK Radio Network as well. So maybe if we just start about yourself first of all, and then we'll move on to other topics of the area. And see how we go. So
I want to give people a quick kind of hint as to what we might be talking about. I don't know if you guys can see that.
Oh yeah.
So I've come prepared.
No sponsorship. No sponsorship. For those that couldn't see that, Andy's wearing a Ghostbusters t-shirt.
Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters! I can't hear you.
For those that are listening in on podcasts and stuff. So Ian, I mean, you've got a bit of a psychic background, which is a very interesting take for a regular GP. Makes me wonder about all the GPs I've ever gone to see in my past. You know, do they think all this sort of stuff is rubbish, or do you think secretly they've got some thoughts about all this area? I mean, you're the guy to ask on that, I think.
It's interesting because yeah, I mean, I'm very active on various Facebook groups for doctors, and there was a group called Doctors Net UK. And I've always been very open about what happened to me in about 2003, because it was mind-blowing how I suddenly got a message from a patient that made me pursue psychic development. And then I started getting messages myself and all sorts of weird coincidences. It was a very wacky, wild ride for me, my family, my practice and my patients, to be honest. And it opened out my mind. And of course, me being me, I'm not frightened to talk about this. I'm quite upfront about it. I like to share my experiences because I think we're all in it together, basically. And I think if weird stuff is happening, then someone's got to talk about it, bear witness to it, and put it out there. And once you start talking to it amongst doctors, I mean, they're just like people. When you get them on their own, they'll admit they've had a few things, but no one wants to talk about it because everybody's afraid of looking stupid. But I'm not afraid of looking stupid because I work from the premise I probably am stupid, so it doesn't matter. And I would be happy to engage people and tell people what's happened to me. Yeah, so I mean, not only did I start having the experience, I embraced it, and like I tend to do, I tend to sort of try and incorporate it in my work as a doctor. Fortunately, I'm blessed with partner. We're in a very busy practice in Enfield, North London, and I'm blessed with very good open-minded partners who, whilst they wouldn't do what I'm doing, they're quite happy to let me pursue my interests as long as it's safe and not endangering patients. And obviously you've got to be professional. Yeah, so I've managed to incorporate it as part of my life. My patients know that I sometimes get these odd messages that come through and weird things happen. And of course, once they know you're interested, they start to tell you their stories. So it's been a very interesting, it hit me when I was 48, I'm now 65. It's been a very, very interesting part of my career that I didn't really expect would happen. So yeah.
When you say you kind of use it within your profession, is there anything kind of like that's state mandated telling you that you shouldn't do it? I mean, for instance, how do you do it? Do you slip in kind of like a couple of psychic things as you're giving a diagnosis?
No, I don't use it for diagnosis.
Okay.
I mean, because I don't do healing either. I mean, I might do. If you're a spiritualist, if you believe in spiritualism, you'd say, well, you have healing guides working with you anyway. I don't go there. But actually, one of the reasons why I don't go there is I'm not a believer, you see, I'm a seeker. So I still don't know. And there are other alternative explanations. I mean, so I'm looking for evidence. And the best way to get evidence is giving someone a message and see if it means anything. So to some extent, I'm trying to convince myself, I suppose. So whenever I end up giving a really good message, which is not all, I mean, I'm not I'm not the best medium in the world, believe me. I'm, there are way better, and I'm just, it's just something I do. It's not, obviously, I'm not a professional medium. But whenever you do end up giving a message that's evidential and useful, I think, my God, that's amazing. And that sort of makes me think, well, maybe there is. In fact, my patients tend to believe it more than I do. And they say, for God's sake, doc, why don't you just believe? The answer is because when you've trained in science and medicine, belief is not, it's not, okay, I believe I love my wife. I believe I'm a doctor. But in terms of believing evidence, it's not a matter of belief, because in science, what you do is you construct a hypothesis, then you try and knock it down.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is reducing the level of uncertainty. But you never know. You only know what you don't know. You only know what isn't true. And so belief isn't really part of science. It's a matter, so right now, the hypothesis I'm working with is, yeah, probably spiritualists might have a point. We're certainly greater. I believe that enough's happened to me to believe that paranormal phenomena occur. And this spiritualist hypothesis is useful. It's not the only one, but it's certainly a framework within which one can work and develop. I think you always need a framework within which to do this sort of work, because it can be very destabilizing. I mean, when you start opening up to these psychic phenomena, you become a bit of a space cadet. I mean, I was the guy at parties drinking one hand, celery stick in the other, backing you into a corner saying, guess what happened to me, and they put it back, yeah. We all, it's called the space cadet phase. Eventually that goes away. But when this stuff happens to you, it completely knocks you for six. It's interesting. I mean, although I'm Jewish background, I'm not religious, but I the Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, which is, the magical system. In fact, I discovered that, in fact, one of my partners is Jewish and very religious, and he was saying that actually, in the Jewish mystical tradition, you're not meant to even talk about this stuff or even study it until you're obviously a man, because it's a very patriarchal religion, but you have to be over the age of 40 and married with children.
Oh wow.
because they recognize that it's actually destabilizing, because I mean I'm sure you've all met people who've gone off slightly round, they're just going off in the distance, they slightly goes a little bit round the bend, and you can't quite reach them.
I know, plenty of those.
exactly so for me, I mean, I was established in my work. I had 2 kids. I had a wife who was very supportive. And when all this stuff started happening to me, which was like occasionally hearing voices that would give me evidential messages or really weird coincidences, I was in an environment where I could discuss it with people and talk about it. Even my patients, my patients were very helpful. I had a couple of patients who knew about this stuff. One guy called Dave Godfrey, who actually was a healer, that was also former science teacher, and he gave me some really good advice. And his advice was, you need to join a psychic development circle, and you need to sort of pursue it. And I said, well, I'm not doing that. He said, well, if you don't, it can drive you nuts. And his advice was good advice, and eventually I did. And after a while, it all becomes normal, just something you do. So occasionally when I'm with patients, I'll pick up something, and of course, now most of my patients know what I do, and they can tell. They say, you get this look in your eye, doc. What are you picking up? I say, oh, okay. but sometimes it'll just happen, and no, obviously I say, look, I do get these notions. I don't know what they mean, but do you want me to share it with you? And they'll say, yeah. And I say, look, I don't know what it means, but it's for you to work out. Let's work it together. And of course, with mental mediumship, you're not often hearing voices. You're often having images or symbolic things. And you say, well, what did that mean to you? And then I say, well, it means that. And there's a bit of a toing and froing. So it's not like platform mediumship, which is very difficult, where you're saying, I've got this and this and this and this. I mean, you can do that, but it's often more a one-to-one reading, so you could say it's a bit of mediumship, it's a bit of intuition, obviously quite a lot of cold reading as well, I'm sure. You're looking at people's body language. You can't get away from that. So it's an interesting and eclectic mix, and it's very useful for bereavement counselling. And it's I mean, this is not the place to tell it maybe, but I had some stunning experiences, just even recently.
Go for it. If you want to tell us, we'll be interested.
Oh, well, I'll tell you one that's recent. I've got a patient, and she came to see me, and she's a dinner lady. She works at the school, and I know her really well, but just as a person, I don't know what her hobbies are. And I sensed that there was. I was speaking to her, just like I'm speaking to you, and I suddenly saw. I said, Penny, have you been collecting milk tokens? She said, milk tokens? I said, yeah, flat things connected with milk. She said, no. I said, milk bottle tops. You remember the old milk bottle tops, like Blue Peter, these the silver foil milk bottle tops? Have you been collecting? She said, yeah, I've been collecting milk bottle tops, but not the silver foil ones, plastic ones. I said, okay. I said, do you mind if we pursue this? She said, no, she's really into this stuff. I said, I've now got a lollipop lady, school crossing attendant, for if there's anybody here from the States listening. And they wear this white sort of mac, and they carry a stick with a stop children for crossing, because like a big lollipop. And she said, yeah, I can take that. And then I felt the presence of a lady, grey-haired lady, in about her 70s who'd passed. And I said, look, I think I can sense this woman around, and can you take her? But she's calling you a diamond, and she wants me to give you a red ribbon with a medal on it, and she wants you to put it around your neck, and she wants me to give you a kiss on the forehead. So I said, do you mind if I do that? So I said, I made mind putting this red ribbon and gold thing around that, and I gave her a kiss on the forehead, and she just said, oh my God, you couldn't possibly know that, because I didn't know what I was saying. I actually got recorded her on my phone, but she wouldn't want me to sort of broadcast it. But her look was a picture. So the story goes that she's a dinner lady at school, and one of her friends was a school teacher, the lady I described, who died recently. Now, this school teacher had a daughter who was a lollipop lady, and the lollipop lady's son was a disabled boy, and he had a wheelchair, but his wheelchair needed to be upgraded, but they didn't have the money for it. And the wheelchair firm said, as a sort of publicity stunt, if she could collect the weight of the wheelchair in plastic milk bottle tops, they would give them a new wheelchair. And just that day, she collected enough, and she got the right weight.
Wow.
Now, I mean, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
But that was absolutely stunning. And every so often I look at my phone, I thought, this actually happened. Now, that was stunning evidence for her, and it was stunning evidence for me. She just stood there saying, you couldn't possibly know that. And I stood there and said, no, I couldn't possibly know that. What, we just sat there like, my God, where did that come from? So and that's in the GP consultation. So, I mean, that's not normal, you see. And the other one recently, I got a patient called Vic, and he won't mind me telling this because I actually asked him. So Vic, this is where I actually saved the health service some money. Vic came to see me with a cough that wouldn't get better, and it was awful. And he's at the age where you do a chest x-ray and everything, and his cough wouldn't go away, and you think, well, this could be something serious. And he saw me, and he saw various partners at the surgery, and eventually been referred along with the suspected cancer pathway, and had all sorts of things done, CT scans, tubes down his throat, whatever. And this guy could not. The minute he started talking, he would start coughing. His life was misery. And he was actually in tears. And one day he came to see me, and he was in tears. And I said, well, hopefully they'll get to the bottom of it. Anyway, I knew that they hadn't, because I got the letters from the consultant, and I was dreading seeing him. And he came to see me, and he had his head in his hands. And I said, Vic, they haven't found anything. And he just cried. So I thought, well, what do I do? So I thought, okay, let's broaden it out a bit, because it seemed to be barn door physical thing, but maybe there was a psychological component. So he said, Vic, did anything happen to you just before you had your symptoms? And he said, no. I said, because if you've had this for a year, what happened last year? He said, oh, come to think about it, my brother-in-law Ken died. And as he said it, I felt this whoosh, and I saw a row of miniature whiskey bottles. And now Vic, again, he knows. I said, Ken, do you mind if I tell you what I'm sensing? He said, no, go ahead, Ian. I said, I've seen a row of miniature whiskey bottles. He said he used to collect miniature whiskey bottles. And as he said that, the minute he started, I made that link, more information started flowing through. So I was suddenly found myself in my head, looked like I was in a workshop. I could see engineering manuals and machinery I couldn't make sense of. And I knew that this guy, whoever I connected with, read a lot, but only read technical manuals. That's all he read. And that he was very good with his hands. And then I said, can you take that? He said, yes, my brother-in-law. He said, he makes, I'd never heard these heart spoons. I said, what heart spoons? He said, when they take hearts out of people for heart transplants, they have these spoons. And he makes the special ones for little babies when they're doing heart operations. I never heard of them. And he's the only one of the few guys in the country who makes them. And that was his specialty. Okay, great. Then I was transported into the guy's pub, and I could see him drinking. I could describe that. And then I saw this field, and it made no sense to me at all. I could see there was like a boundary with a ditch to the left, and there was a green expanse. There are little flags throughout the field. And I said, okay, Vic, I'm seeing this. What am I describing? And he just laughed. He said, there's no way you could know that. I said, what am I seeing? He said, you're seeing the golf course. And he said, he wanted his ashes scattered there. We weren't meant to, but we did it anyway. Okay. And he looked at me and said, that's amazing. Anyway, so I said, well, okay, Vic, I hope that helped. But I still felt I hadn't done much. Anyway, I said, well, come and see in a month's time. So a month's time he comes to see me, and he's fine. He said, he comes in smiling, because I was dreading seeing him because I thought he'd still be coughing. I said, how are you doing, Vic? He said, I'm cured. I said, what do you mean cured? He said, the minute you gave me that reading, he said, I felt this weight lifting from my chest. And within 3 days, the cough had gone completely, hasn't come back, and he hasn't come back since. So I've said, look, I mean, I've done this enough. I mean, when someone's psychologically upset over an incident, sometimes just talking about it evinces a cure, you know, because just if they're aware of what's causing it, it can cause a relief. I said, well, maybe I wasn't in touch with your brother, or maybe it was just that we got to the bottom of it. And he said, look, Ian, I don't care what you say. I think that you're in contact with it. And if you don't believe that, there's something wrong with you. So,
I love the fact that the readee is trying to convince the medium.
yeah. Well, this is my thing. It was like that when I was developing, because all the people I was in circle with were sorry for me. They said the trouble with you is you're overeducated. And it's true. It's true. When you go on when you're trained in Western scientific materialism, it does affect the way you think. And one thing I actually learned from this is that for years I thought that when I gave an explanation to my patients, they knew what I was going on about. What I didn't realize was that unless you're, and this is not talking down to people, but unless you've been through the Western materialistic mindset of going to university, in my day, because now university is much more broad. In my day, it was a very small area. You had to do your, if you're doing medicine, it's like science A levels, it was really, really highly difficult to get into. You were channeled down a way of thinking, and most people don't think like that. And I don't actually think it's great. It's got its view. Science is wonderful and everything, but you have to accept there are other ways of thinking, and thinking in symbols and the narrative view, making a story of what your life's about is really, really important. And I think that's one of the problems that the Western mindset's got. I think that's why people are railing against it, because never has science and medicine been so powerful, but never have people felt so disconnected from it. I think we're using it now. I mean, look at this, and this is all as a result of it. And I think it's because it's lost touch with the human side of it. Now, in medicine, of course, that's what you're doing. You're dealing with the science, but you're also dealing with the human side, and you get this dynamic tension. So I feel what I'm trying to do is to bring the two together.
I think there's a bit of a different way that West versus East, for instance, do it. So what I understand is that in Asia, India and China and Japan, etc., they have a more holistic approach. So they look at the whole body, and they look at the nutrition and the balance and everything. Whereas I think with Western, it's got like you've got one little problem, we'll zoom in on that problem and fix
Absolutely. It's a reduction spread. I mean, I'm lucky my wife's Indian. I mean, she was born in India. She came over here when she was 4. She's a doctor as well. And when all this started happening with me, I mean, I know couples where someone went psychic and it split their relationship up. But in my case, my wife, I mean, she's very down to earth, and she believes more than me. But she doesn't want to train it. She says, no, you go off and do it. It's fine. Are you sure? No, it's fine. It's real. Don't worry about it. So she was really, really supportive. I mean, I'm not sure about my kids. I mean, I've got 2 sons. One's now a GP himself. And and the other one's actually has just done his PhD, and he's a researcher he's a researcher into machine learning. He did an internship at Google. He's in Germany. He's a clever boy. When you're at Google, they invite people to come in. You can come in as a guest. And he was in Zurich, but he wouldn't let me in there. And I said, why not? He said, because I don't want to be known as the guy at Google with the weird dad. But actually, because
you need to go in dressed as a wizard. You need a full Gandalf outfit with a staff. That'd be amazing.
Well, I normally dress like that, you see. But actually, when he came to London, he got me in there. It's quite a nice place, actually. Me and my wife were the oldest people there, actually. It's quite remarkable. Yeah, so that's me and my crazy family. But yeah, I mean, really, it's not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about the Enfield Poltergeist, I suppose.
Well, how about going back to the beginning of your psychic stuff? Because I know there's a really interesting story where you was a teenager and your sister was with you, and I think our listeners and viewers might be interested to know about some early experiences, and then you kind of forgot about it, didn't you?
Well, Neil,
your webcam is off, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, mine is. You can't see
no,
me.
I can see Neil.
He can see.
I can see a profile picture. I can't see the webcam.
I can see mine. I can see mine.
I can see Neil.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's just me.
Yeah.
Strange.
Okay. So actually, I've got actually. What I realised is, because when I started going through this and my book came out, obviously I've been doing a lot of reading. I realised that actually there's more in my life than I thought. So I'll tell you a couple of stories, if you don't mind, from my life I hadn't realised. Now we know that when people have near-death experiences, they often come back transformed, don't they? Before I started telling all these stories about my psychic experience, I used to tell a story that actually would happen to me. I had a near-death experience. I actually did. I used to tell the story about. Well, I didn't almost die, but it wasn't a near-death experience, because you don't have to die with a near-death experience or be at death's door. But I was really ill. So in my day, if you had a sore throat, if you had enough of them, they took your tonsils out. We don't do that now. I mean, you can have enormous tonsils and adenoids coming out your nose, they still won't do it, right? When they should. But in my day, if you had enough sore throats, they whipped your tonsils out. And of course, I had a mum who, the minute you were ill, she'd tuck you up in bed and give you a buttered roll and tomato soup. Well, I mean, you do that to a kid, it's obvious. You're going to start saying, I've got a sore throat, mum. Don't have to go to school. I'll have my buttered roll, tomato soup. And I didn't actually have a sore throat. But if you look in someone's throat as a doctor, they often look red, Anyway, so
just on a side note, what is the point of tonsils in an evolutionary sense? What do they do?
They're lymph glands, and they guard. You've got lymph glands everywhere where things join other things, and that area, the tonsil and the adenoid, is like a ring of lymph glands,
right.
So that they protect. You have anything going in from outside, it might be infections, bacteria, viruses. They'll be the first to know, and they'll start sort of protecting you. So that's what they're there. And it's probably not a good idea to remove them, especially when the kid's actually pretending to have a sore throat, as I was. So anyway, I remember going to North Middlesex Hospital and seeing this guy. He actually had a head mirror on,
Oh, really old-fashioned stuff.
They're the ENT surgeons. That's what they had. They used to have a little flame with a head mirror. That's the only time doctors wear it. I mean, I thought when I was going to qualify as a doctor, I'd get my head mirror, but no, it's only ENT surgeons. So anyway, so I end up having my tonsils out, which was not a nice experience, because when they actually cut the tonsil, it's called a guillotine, they cut it and that's it. And they cauterize the tissue so it doesn't bleed. And I started bleeding, and I was losing quite a lot of blood. I was actually bringing up a lot of blood. I must have lost quite a lot of blood, but not enough, because they didn't transfuse me. So I wasn't at death's door. And I remember I was sort of feeling quite ill, and they had to take me back down to the operating theatre, and I had to go under the anaesthetic. Now, when I went under the second time, I had this, what I always thought was a dream. And remember, this was 1964. I was 9. And it was like this. You've ever seen molten glass being extruded and then twisted round when they make these vases? It was like this extrusion, like a very thick umbilical cord, but about that thick, from the center of my abdomen, was being extruded out. And it was twisting. And it was like I was sitting, and it was in this dark place, and this thing was coming out of me, and it was twisting gently, slowly into the distance. And this dark place was like these polytunnels you have in gardens, the black polytunnels with like ribs. It was like I was inside one of them. And on the end of this thing that was coming out of me was a tiny little white light, and I knew that I actually was that little light on the end of that thing. And that was nice. And then it just disappeared around the corner, and I didn't know anything. And I always told that story. I didn't know what it meant. And of course, that was before the term near-death experience was coined. Now, I didn't have a being of light, but there were elements of it. You know, a near-death experience doesn't have to have all the elements. I had the tunnel. I had this idea of moving, and certainly the idea that my true essence was actually a tiny little spark on the end of a stalk. Anyway, that's an interesting story. But the weird thing is this. That was at the North Middlesex Hospital. Segue, fast forward 14 years later, I was now a houseman, a doctor, working in the same hospital. And I was doing obstetrics and gynecology. And in those days, if a woman came in, say she just had a baby and there were bits of placenta left, in those days, you were this senior house officer on call. I mean, I was young. I was in my early 20s. You would just phone up the on-call anaesthetist, and the anaesthetist would anesthetize a woman, and you'd just do a D&C. It was like a little suction tube with like a little scraper on it, and you just suck out all the content. Very simple, very easy to do. You'd have to book the theatre. So I phoned up the theatre booking clerk, and she said, "Oh, you can't use the main theatre, doc. It's being redecorated. You have to go to the old block." So she led me through to the old block when I got there, and it was around a few corners. And as I entered this operating theatre, I felt this most peculiar feeling. It was like, oh God, I've been here before. And I said, look, I've been here before. She said, no, you couldn't have been. I said, yeah, I feel like I've been here before. She said, no, you can't have been, because this has been mothballed for about the last 10 years. It was the old paediatric ENT theatre. And that was the theatre I'd had my operation in. Now, the thing is, you say, well, you were there. Actually, I wasn't, because when they anaesthetize you, you're in a side ward. By the time you go into the theatre, and all operating theatres look the same, you're not going to remember that. You're out cold. So that was really interesting. I just thought it was a funny story. That's an interesting thing. It's only with hindsight that I realised that's just another thing in my psychic development.
Yeah,
so I said,
yeah.
maybe something happened to me then. The next thing that happened to me was a UFO incident. So I was 14, and I was born in 1955, so that's 1969. Yeah, there was still, if you believe it, I do believe it, they were landing on the moon. And I was obsessed.
We have a lot of contention there, but carry on.
I was obsessed with astronomy, and I used to look at the sky. And I grew up in Tottenham, North London. Skies weren't that great. So my house looked north from my bedroom window. And it was a big Victorian house. And I used to sit out. So the Victorian house, you've got like a big front, big thing at the back, and they often have a lean-to. They had a 3-story front of the house, a 2-story back. So there's a little window that looked out onto the lean-to, and you could sit out there looking north. So to my right was the railway line that moves out of London going up to Ponders End. And on my left, you could actually see Muswell Hill, Alexandra Palace. So I could see the sky. And I used to sit out there most nights, if it was a warm night, looking at the sky. And then one night I looked up, and I could see it looked like it was about a quarter of the size of the full moon and the same colour. And it was sort of at that above my house, but very high up. I can't estimate how high it was. There was a sheet of cloud reflecting the orange streetlights from London, and that sort of cloud's quite low. I don't know, 300-400 feet. I don't know. It was below that. It was just stuck there above the house. It wasn't doing anything. So
What
I
shape
called
was it in?
It was looked like a full moon, but if you looked at it, it almost looked like it was slightly pear-shaped, like a toy balloon. But it was reflecting this. It was exactly the same color as the full moon, but a quarter of the size. And I looked at it through binoculars, and it was featureless. There were no markings on it. It wasn't the moon. It was below the clouds, and it was just stuck there. I called my mum, and she had a look. She didn't know what it was. And after about a couple of hours, it got boring, so I went to bed. So for some reason, I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning that night, and I opened my bedroom window. I thought, I wonder if that thing's still there. And it was. But by that time, the sky had cleared and you could see the stars, but you could see some very high clouds and they were scudding across the sky. That thing was still there. But as I looked, it started to slowly drift across the sky. But as it moved faster and faster. So by the time it had gone from the western horizon to the eastern horizon above the railway line, it was really shooting fast and it dwindled really rapidly across the sky. Almost like if you ever remember the old original Star Trek, the original series, it goes like that. It was like that at the end. And I still to this day don't know what it was. But the question is, of course, is why did I wake up at that precise moment?
Mm.
And up to that point, I'd had quite a lot of trouble at school in terms of not being very academically clever or good at it and things like that. I mean, I was the youngest kid in my class. And, you know, I was with kids who were like a year ahead of me. So it could just be the fact I was getting older. But from that point on, it was almost like I woke up and I suddenly started to get better and better. And then I excelled and then I ended up going to medical school. Looking back and hearing things later on, I do wonder if, you know, the idea that there's this link between UFOs and paranormal phenomena and spirit lives, and I do, and with subsequent events, you do wonder, is that part of it? Was it?
We're fully there. We're fully.
Right.
We have been for a while. Me and Neil.
Yeah.
We absolutely believe. I hope I'm not speaking for you too much, Neil, but we can see definitely the connection between because basically it falls into the realms of the paranormal. So you've got the ufologists and you've got the ghost hunters.
Yeah.
We're talking about dimensions here, and whether they're dimensions on this planet or a different planet or a different dimension, you know, they're all part of the same bag, so far as I'm concerned. Would you agree, Neil?
Yes, I can hear some weird music from somewhere.
Oh, it might be my wind chimes. I'll go and take them
Oh,
down.
okay. I was thinking, cue the strange music as we go into the subject. I thought, how topical, you know.
But actually, I haven't told Andy the story, which you actually originally.
The original one, yes.
The original story. Sorry, because I got off half cop. But so this is the story that my wife was sick of. Right? She'd heard it. She didn't know the characters involved, and she was so sick of it. Every time we used to tell this story, she used to roll her eyes. I've ended up telling this story on all over the place, and it's been broadcast. She's now given up. She's obviously, the world needs to know this story. So first year at medical school. Now they really. So I just done my A levels. I was still really into space and science, you know. So I went to Nottingham Medical School. My friend from school, he went to Leicester. Nottingham and Leicester are very, very close. He did physics. And he ran a disco and he had lots of friends. I used to go there to party. Well, I'd work at Nottingham really hard, then go to Leicester to party. And he had a girlfriend, and his girlfriend was staying with him in his house in Oakwood. And me and my sister went round there. So his girlfriend, Felicity, she had long, dark hair. She was quite a nice looking girl. And they were sat next to each other. And I was sat with my sister. I was sitting opposite my friends, and my sister was sitting so she could see their profile. In the front room of a 1930s house in Oakwood with a full electric light. We never took drugs. We never smoked anything. All we had was coffee. And we'd been drinking coffee. It was about midnight. And all of a sudden, the atmosphere changed. And we all said, the room's gone green. We didn't know what it meant, but it felt like the room had gone green. Then it cleared. And then suddenly, I look up at Felicity, and there's someone else there. There's this blonde-haired snow queen, blonde fringe, instead of waist-length dark hair, shoulder-length blonde hair, high cheekbones, and these piercing blue eyes looking right into my soul. And the curious thing was that she had very curiously distorted white lips, but very thick, as if they hadn't formed properly and coated with what looked like frosted lipstick. And I got this message in my, now you call it a download, but we're talking about 1974. That term didn't exist then, but it was like a download. In my head was immediately, I mark this, know there's more to life than meets the eye. One day you'll understand. And as that message came into my mind, my sister started screaming at the top of her voice, and she was only 15 at the time. She was terrified. And she said, my God, can you see those lips? Can you see those lips? And I turned around to her and said, what, you've seen it too? And looked back, and Felicity was completely normal. Well, I burst into tears. Not that I was frightened, it was just I was overwhelmed with the emotion. My sister was screaming hysterically. And my friends looked at us like we were mad. And we had to tell them what had happened. They knew nothing about it. We jumped into my dad's car. it was now about 2 o'clock in the morning after we calmed down. Not woke them up. You can imagine what they said. take your friends back home and come to bed. The next day we phoned round my friends, and my friend Steve said, well, I don't know what it was, but my next door neighbour, guy called Keith Hudson, is a medium. And maybe he'll know. So we went round to see Steve's house in Phillip Lane in Tottenham, and this rather strange guy who's 27, so he's a bit older than us, prematurely balding. Keith Hudson comes in and says, oh yeah, what you saw was a spirit guide. And he said, it's in the Bible. Like, that meant much to me, you know. And he looked at me, he said, Ian, you've got a lot of knowledge around you. You don't know you know it, but you will one day. And I thought, I bet he says that to everyone. Mind you, I was a medical student, so obviously, you know, I just done my A-levels. He would say that. But anyway, so I didn't know what to make of it. And he showed me his little Spiritualist National Handbook guide, Transfiguration Phenomena. I thought, well, you know, I don't believe in spirits. Yeah, okay, something happened. Maybe it was a hallucination, but hang on, if it's a hallucination, how come my sister saw it? That means telepathy is real. That's not in the textbooks either. Very difficult. So, you know, I shoved it to one side and just told the story of itself. And it was a good story. I mean, I trot it out. So I stopped telling my near-death story. And I had Felicity's face story, because, you know, these things are nice to tell people. I actually told it to a couple of patients, which they found quite interesting. Well, funnily enough, when I started having my paranormal phenomena, my wife noticed that there was a guy giving a talk at the local spiritualist church, and my patient Dave had already told me that I should go to a spiritualist church to join a circle. And she said, well, this Keith Hudson, he's giving a talk at the local spiritualist church, a demonstration of clairvoyance. He's taking a service, in other words. We ought to go. She said, is that the guy you saw with Felicity's face? I said, yeah. She said, well, why don't we go? So we went. And I hadn't seen him for 27 years, actually. And I looked different. I mean, I had a beard in those days when I was a teenager, and dark, long, curly hair. I mean, look at me now. It's terrible. That's what age does to you. And because I'm actually unrecognizable. So I sat cowering at the back of this really weird place, a spiritualist church. I don't want to go to these places.
Which one was it of interest? Because I might know
Beacon
it.
of Light in Enfield.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I do know it. Yeah.
Lovely place. Absolutely lovely. I mean, I sat in circle there for a while as well. And then, so Keith gets up and he starts giving everyone messages. And he comes to me and he says, sir, you have a lot of knowledge around you. You don't know you know it, but you will very soon. They're telling me you're going to write a book about it. I thought, well, that's similar to the message he gave me when I was a teenager. He must say it to everyone. Actually, he doesn't. And he didn't recognize me. And how we established contact was the president of the church stood up and said, Mr. Hudson doesn't drive. Can anyone give me a lift back to Walthamstow? So I stood up and said, and sort of bound up to the front and said, yeah, but only if he comes out to my house and has a cup of tea first. And he sort of stepped back because he thought, you know, you do get a lot of nutters at these places. I said, Keith, it's me, Ian, you know, Ian Rubenstein. I said, what, the doctor? I said, yeah. He said, oh, I was talking about you the other day. So he came back to my place. He had a cup of tea. He sat by the back door smoking, because I realised that mediums tend to smoke like chain smoking. I took him back to Walthamstow, and he showed me around his church. He said, look, he said, you don't have to be a spiritualist. We run the largest open circle in North London. And if you want to sit in, you can just sit in and, you know, and see what you do. I thought, well, as it's Keith, I'll go. So I did. And that's how I started training as a medium. And that's when the really interesting stuff started happening. So, but that's another story. Anyway, so over the years, my patients know that I'm interested in all this stuff. And of course, it's quite appropriate. And it adds to sort of the feeling of rightness that I should be the psychic doctor in Enfield, in the area. Actually, the area, my practice covers Green Street, where the famous Poltergeist was. Of course, I never saw it because that was in 1977. I actually hadn't qualified. I was in Nottingham then, although I'm from Tottenham, and so I'm from the area. I mean, I obviously heard about it, because once people realised that I was interested in this, then patients started coming in and telling me about their experiences with the poltergeist. So should I tell you a few?
Absolutely, please do.
Okay, so I've got a patient called Roy. He's left the practice now. Lovely guy. And Roy ran the used cooker shop opposite my surgery. So it was a domestic appliance which they refurbish and resell. So you go to a surgery and you see all these ovens and fridges outside, and you know. and he ran that shop. And I'd looked after Roy for ages. And when he heard that I was interested in this, he said, Ian, you ever heard about the Enfield Poltergeist? I said, yeah. He said, I saw it. I said, what do you mean I saw it? What do you mean you saw it? He said, well, I used to pick up someone from the house every so often and take them out. You know, I think he used to work either with Peggy, or I suppose it would have been Peggy Hodgson or something, someone who lived in the house. He'd go in there and pick them up. And he'd normally wait outside. And one day, no, it couldn't have been Peggy, because Peggy said they're not ready yet. There was someone who was staying there who collected. And she said, oh, so-and-so's not ready yet. Why don't you come in and have a cup of tea? So he did. He sat down on a little single settee, and Peggy came in and put the cup and saucer on the arm, and she left the room. And he said the thing lifted up, sailed gracefully across the room, and smashed into the wall. And he said, Doc, you've never seen anyone run as fast as I did in your life. He said, I couldn't wait to get out of that place. So the interesting thing is that he told this story for years. And Roy is he likes deep sea diving. And of course, the place to do that is in Sri Lanka. And I don't know if you remember Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah, that's where he went and lived.
Yeah. So, and Roy actually had a house by the coast in Sri Lanka that actually got swept away in the tsunami, actually. Okay. So he was telling this story to a cab driver in Colombo. And the cab driver said, oh, you must meet Arthur. I'll tell Arthur about this. So Arthur C. Clarke got to hear about it, and he told it to Arthur C. Clarke. And he came back with a photo of him and his wife, either side of Arthur C. Clarke. So he's very proud of that. And I have absolutely no doubt. I mean, there's no way that man was lying. Right? I mean, really, you know, it's a good story. So, yes, so that's one of the stories, yeah.
So there's a lot of controversy, because obviously the girls admitted that they were faking part of it, but that's not to say that there weren't other real things going on. But of course, it does muddy the waters, and the skeptics would just say, well, the girls are faking it, so end of story. But we obviously don't think that is the end of the story.
No. I mean, I don't know if I've got a book here, actually. I got it down. It was given to me because I remember the Ghost Club, and Alan Murdy very kindly forwarded me a copy of this because he knows I'm interested in, I live in Enfield. This is a very good book, the Enfield Poltergeist tapes. This is from Maurice Gross's tapes. You know, Maurice Gross was the researcher. Now, I met Maurice. Another story. Now, look, as far as I was concerned, I was a perfectly ordinary GP, and then someone picked me up by the scruff of the neck and said, oi, look at this. And I'd be catapulted in this weird world. I mean, I'd obviously heard about the Enfield Poltergeist, but I was in the gym one day, and there was a guy there who was a GP who worked with my wife. And he said, oh, Ian, I hear you're into all this weird stuff. I said, yeah. He said, my patient's Maurice Gross. Would you like to meet him? So I said, yeah, can you arrange it? He said, well, I'll have a chat with him. And if he wants to speak to you, I'll give you his number. So he phoned me up and said, yeah, Maurice will speak to you. So I phoned up Maurice Gross, and he said, as you're a GP in Enfield, you're interested in it, why don't you come round to my house? We'll have a chat, and I'll play you the tapes. So I did. So, you know, all of a sudden I was in this weird world. I was meeting like Maurice Gross, for God's sake. You know, what was all this about? So he was a lovely guy, very tiny man, short. He took me into his house. I met his wife, Betty. She was doing some baking. I had chocolate biscuits, and we sat in his front room, and he told me the story of how he became a psychic investigator. And unfortunately, it was from the death of his daughter, Janet. Janet had just finished her degree at Cardiff, and she was coming back on a motorcycle and was killed in a motorcycle accident. And Maurice got what he thought was a sign from her. He saw a rainbow at a particular moment with a rainstorm that, when he told it to me, it didn't mean a lot to me, but it obviously had a profound effect on Maurice, as these things do, because often they're very personal. And it made him think that she was trying to contact him. So he researched it and realized that the Society for Psychical Research was worth going to. And he went there. And it so happens that, of course, at the moment he joined, then someone had reported, I think from the Daily Mirror, that there was a problem going on, and that the SPR had been alerted to what was going on in Enfield. So he he joined. He went there and witnessed all the phenomena. So anyway, I spoke to Morris, and we had a lovely conversation. He played me the tapes, and Morris hadn't just witnessed the Enfield poltergeist. He was head of the Spontaneous Phenomena Committee, I think it's called.
Yeah, the people that burn. Is that right? No,
Spontaneous
no. Spontaneous
That's-
phenomena is
yeah.
spontaneous psychic. So they don't adhere to one hypothesis, which is the spirit hypothesis. It could be psychokinesis. So it's spontaneous phenomena. And he said, look, whatever's going on is definitely real. He's seen it. He said, I've seen enough poltergeists in my time, not just the Enfield. I've investigated loads of them. And I said, well, what do you think is going on? He said, I think the best way of thinking about it is like this. He said, this wasn't told to him. This was told to him by a Romany lady he knew. He was speaking to about it. And he basically said, think of the energy of these adolescent girls, often, or boys, disturbed adolescents. They've got a lot of energy. And this energy sort of is like, can be used for all sorts of things. It's like a psychic energy, psychological energy. And it's like an energy football. And then maybe some discarnate entities come along, they start kicking around and they start using it. And that's what it is. So it's a bit of them doing it, the kids, but also a bit of the others. In fact, what you're talking about is actually spontaneous physical mediumship, which is what I think you'd now call it. In other words, there's enough energy. The energies are they're open to it. They're undeveloped physical mediums because there's a lot of energy. So some of the stuff they could do, some of the stuff they do by trickery because they're kids and why not? And then, of course, there's a long history of mediums doing trickery. We'll talk about that in a minute. A lot of the very most famous mediums actually were caught out. I mean, not even Colin Fry, Gary Mannion recently, famous one. Eusapia Palladino, who was a very famous.
How did Gary Mannion get caught out?
Infrared cameras.
Infrared camera. Infrared camera.
What did he say?
Well, I don't know. I think he's still doing his stuff.
I saw it actually. I saw the videos, and then I saw a posting online from him. Basically, it was at this place in Kent. I've been to maybe once or twice. The in Ashridge in Kent.
Yes,
the tree, the something tree. It's called
Banyan tree.
Banyan tree. It's like a spiritual centre where they do demonstrations of mediumship and stuff like that. Now, I didn't see Gary Mannion myself at this thing, but I know of the people. I don't know them, but I know the people that run it. And I believe they had some suspicions about this Gary Mannion. He supposedly does psychic surgery. Again, I've never seen him do that, but I was invited to go and see him one time, and I just never got round to it. I said, no, I'll go to my GP instead. So
I'll do it. Yeah.
So basically, the next I heard about this psychic surgeon, Gary Mannion, was when he was exposed, and they'd mounted like infrared cameras in this seance room, and there was all these people sitting around in a circle. That he was in his little trance cabinet, and he crept out the trance cabinet. You can actually see this. Oh my god, it's the gall to do it. He's going round and he's touching people on the back of their heads, and he's quietly taking off his shirt and then running it over their heads so they can feel some clothes, things like that. It's all in complete darkness, of course. And he's doing that the whole time for the whole duration of maybe an hour or something, doing these various things. And then they basically said, look, here we go. You've been exposed. And they played him the tape. So he went back online through his YouTube channel and said, I was directed to do this by the spirit. Yeah.
Isn't that what Colin Fry said as well with the trumpet incident?
I
know he was caught. I don't know the details.
Yeah, it's a good excuse. I mean, who knows? I mean, have you? There's a book called The Trickster and the Paranormal. I can't remember the guy who wrote it. It's a classic. And it looks at. He calls it these liminal areas, these borderland areas. And he said this is where the trickster inhabits. And so whenever you get this sort of UFOs, Bigfoot, mediumship, you always get this trickster phenomena coming in, and it manifests itself in different ways. It appears to play tricks on you. The person doing it appears to be a bit of a trickster. Classic one being Uri Geller. Is he real? Isn't he? People swear that that stuff happens. I mean, Howard Hughes, we were talking about before. He's a friend of his. He said he's been seen stuff happen that couldn't possibly not be paranormal. And yet, at the same time, there's this element of tricksterism. So it seems to be that this area invites those sort of personalities.
How was Gary Mannion as a platform medium? I mean, have you ever seen him? Was he any good or?
Never seen him myself.
He gave me healing, actually.
He did. And did it make a difference?
I'll tell you a story. Trish Robertson.
Oh yeah.
Yep. She who I know quite well. She contacted me. She did a book about healing, and she'd looked at Gary Mannion's healing cases and was reasonably impressed. The weird thing is, I'd just been diagnosed with arthritis in my ankle. I was really miserable. I mean, really, really, really miserable. And she'd sent me this book. I said, oh, maybe I ought to have some healing because I've just been given this diagnosis. So I thought, well, hang on a minute. This is spirit. Let's follow it up. So I tracked Gary down, and bugger me, he lives in South Benfleet in the road, wait for it, parallel to my sister-in-law's road. So it's like her house. If you go straight out her door and go through the other house, on the other house, and then through another house, he'd be there. Yeah. I thought, I've got to go and see him. So I went round to his house, and he was very nice, charged me 20 quid. I mean, I'm in for anything. I'll give it a go. I lay down, he put his hands on my ankles. You could see his house was obviously the city. He had like black bin bags round to sort of block out the light. He said, yeah, that's for my circle. Very nice. Did it help? And I've still got arthritis. I mean, that's the thing with healing. I mean, but for me, it wasn't the fact that it was healing. It was the sheer coincidence was delightful, you know. And whenever that happens, maybe I'm crazy, but that makes me think, you know, that there's a sign, there's a little journey there that I've got to explore this. And that actually cheered me up, actually. So yeah, so Gary Mannion cheered me up, but I can't attest to his mediumship or anything because I haven't seen him there. But that's me and Gary Mannion. He probably won't even remember me, to be honest.
I believe he lives in Australia now. I think he moved there.
Oh, okay,
yeah. So yeah, whether that's deliberate after his thing, I don't know. But I do recollect that he flies back and does these things, or did. Although he's still doing that. But yeah,
I can't think why I'd leave South Benfleet for Australia. It mystifies me.
Yeah.
Who would book him? Who would actually book him after that?
I know.
That's the trouble, isn't it? Yeah. But Colin Fry, though, recovered from his he was reading a trumpet round, wasn't he? Colin Fry.
He gave me a really good reading as well.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a weird one with Colin Fry. I saw him at, I think it was St Albans Spiritualist Church, coming up to about 9 years ago now. And I was sitting at the back of the church, and he'd already done part one of his demonstration, which was really good. Then they had a break, and it was all part two. And he began, and he said, now I'm looking for someone here. I've got a grandmother who's saying about someone that plays guitar, or they haven't played it for a while, but they should pick it up again. She doesn't like the music, but she says you're very talented at it. And he's going around, who used to play the guitar? And he's pointing, who used to play the guitar and might be considering starting it up again? And this lady put up her hand, and she'd already had a reading in part one. And he goes, no, it's not you. I've already come to you. And he looked at me, and I had a lot longer hair then, so whether that was a thing, but he said, sir, is it you? And I went, yeah. And I play bass guitar in bands and things. And I was actually thinking of getting together with my brother, who's a guitarist, to form a band, which we did go on and do. And so he gave me that reading. I can't remember the details of it, but it was quite good, I thought. And then at the end, I thought, well, you know, it's the end of the thing. He's selling his books. Oh, I'll go and buy a book of his and get him to sign it, you know. So we all got in the queue, and I was the very last person to sort of get my book signed. So I said, oh, thanks for the reading you gave me there. And he goes, he says, did you used to work in a children's home? I went, no. And he goes, he says that when I came and gave you a reading, he said, I could have sworn that you was the guy I used to know that worked in a children's home as like a child psychologist. And I said, no, I have nothing to do with that at all. He goes, oh, crikey. He said, you look the spitting image of this guy I used to know. So anyway, he says, right, who do you want the book signed to? I said, can you sign it to Neil, please? He goes, "Oh my God," he says, "that was the name of the bloke I've just been telling you about." So the weird stuff again.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I've got to tell you a story. I went to a psychic fair in Southgate once, just because I was getting into all this, and I was, I wasn't sure what I was doing. I was just investigating. So I was in this psychic fair in Southgate, and I went up to this woman. She was doing crystal readings. She's charging 20 quid. I wasn't going to pay 20 quid for a crystal reading, but we got talking, and I said, and she said, "What's your name?" I said, "I'm Ian Rubenstein. I'm a doctor, and I'm interested in this." And she said, "Oh my God." And she showed me her pamphlet. She had like a list of, she had my name on it. She said, "I've written your name down because I want to get your book." And I just, where did that come from? I mean, it was just weird coincidence, just stuff like that. And when they happen, you think, there is definitely something going on. And now my son, who's the mathematician, the one who's just got his PhD, says, "No, Dad, it's just chance." And
there's quite a divide within the kind of the scientific community and the spiritual community, as you're blatantly aware. But interestingly, I mean, I actually run psychic fairs myself, more commercial based within kind of pub settings and things like that. So we get not so much spiritual people, but we get kind of all walks of life coming in, including doctors and nurses. And they do come from the medical profession. They do have readings with us, and they do believe it. And sometimes I have chats with them, and I say, you've obviously come. I won't ask your background medically, but obviously you do work in that area. And how do you kind of like balance between the spiritual side and the medically trained side? And they just said they just compartmentalize it. That's our learning, that's how we've done it, that's the medical stuff, but also I've had weird stuff happen as well, and that's in a different compartment kind of thing. That's kind of how they've explained it to me. And I don't know if you've ever seen shows called Haunted Hospitals on Sky or anything like that.
No, I haven't seen no.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Well, I mean, every you work in a hospital, the nurses, because they're with people, they always got stories to tell you. Because they're hanging around the place.
It is rife. I would say almost every hospital, especially the old one, would have some kind of story going on.
Yeah, I write about that in my book, actually.
Oh, about the doctors rushing to a resus, and they saw this person lying on.
That's
I
right.
remember. Yeah, tell the story. It's a good one. It's a really
well, it's
good
a story, and then we'll go for a break.
Right.
So what it was, I was at someone's 50th birthday party in the summer. Was all camping around the campfire, and this lady whose birthday it was says, "Come on, Neil, tell us some of your stories." So I said, "Oh, okay then." So I told a few spooky stories. And this girl, who I didn't know, but she was a friend of the lady I was with, said, "Oh, I'm a nurse, but I don't normally tell people about this. But as you've just said it, I'll talk about it." And she said that she works at this hospital somewhere on the south coast. I'm assuming it's Southampton Hospital, but I could be wrong. But it doesn't really matter which hospital it is. And she said that I wouldn't have believed it, but she goes, "I do believe it because I know the doctors that it happened to, and I know they wouldn't give me any bullshit," sort of thing. And she said that basically you got all the really sick patients that are on life support machines on one floor, close to death, etc., all on monitors and alarms and everything. And on the floor above, you've got the doctors and their medical assistants, and they got pagers and things. And then when they're paged, someone's crashed or something on the floor below, they've got to go down the stairs and try and resuscitate him in some way. So instead of taking the lift, they're running down the stairs. This doctor and his two medical assistants are rushing down the stairs, and they come past this patient who's in a gown, sitting on the stairs, crouched over, in pain, going, "Oh, my stomach hurts, my stomach hurts." And they said, what are you doing here? And all this girl kept saying was, "My stomach hurts." And they said, "Well, you shouldn't be here. You should be in bed. Look, we've got to go and help someone. We'll send someone back to you to help you, okay? So stay there, and we'll send someone back for you." So they carry on rushing into this ward where they got to resuscitate this patient. There is the patient that got resuscitated, and it's exactly the same girl they saw on the stairs a few seconds earlier, and she was dead on the gurney thing. And of course, they went back there, and she wasn't there. So
good story. I like that one. That's a really good story.
I told my mum that. And she says, "But why would that girl or the soul of her be in pain?" And I said, "Well, My theory is that because she was stuck on the stairs, which acts like a medium's cabinet, which holds energy, and it's a square box-like structure. I've got this theory about this sort of thing.
Mhm.
And she's still in phase to a certain extent with the Earth plane, our
She doesn't know
reality.
she's dead. Doesn't know
Yeah,
she's
she
dead.
doesn't know she's dead. And I think her cord, which you described in your near-death
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
has snapped, and she's feeling the pain of that psychologically, a bit like the psychological cough, if you like.
Yeah.
And she's feeling it, and that's why she's holding her stomach.
Yeah.
And that's why she can be seen and heard by the doctors. And then after a while, she's taken away somewhere, spirit guides or friends take her to the next dimension. And then all is good, we hope. So yeah, that's what happened. So
It's a good story. I like that.
Yeah.
Ian, have you ever been to Hertford Hospital?
No.
Okay, so Hertford is up the road, obviously up the A10, more
Yeah.
near my way.
Yeah.
And I used to know a friend in Army Cadets whose mum was a nurse that used to work at Hertford Hospital. It's quite an old hospital, probably goes back to the 1800s, maybe 1700s. And the nurses and doctors there used to have a little dare. So it wasn't really, there's no A&E there. It's just like a, I don't know, I don't know what the terms is, like a hospital that's not A&E. It's just normal conditions that they look after, but that. And they used to dare each other when one particular ward was empty, there's no patients there, but the beds were there. They would have a little nap sometimes in between shifts, just to kind of recuperate energy. And there was one bed they used to dare each other to lie on because they called it the haunted bed. And so previous to this, they'd have things like taps turning themselves on and doors opening and that kind of thing. And the dare was to have a nap there and survive. When I say survive, as in not run away screaming kind of thing. So my friend's mum was very kind of like, yeah, whatever. It's probably just a load of people mucking around. So she lies down, has a bit of a nap, puts some of the lights out, and then she feels her body being pushed. She turns round, expecting one of her kind of colleagues to go, ha ha, very funny. Nobody there. So she did get a little bit freaked out, and I don't think she slept in that particular bed ever again. But it's rife, and the more you kind of like speak to people, especially kind of in older hospitals, the more you hear these kind of things.
Can I tell you before the break? Can I just tell you this story?
Yeah.
So when I was a houseman, how old was I? I was 22 when I qualified, so I was 23. In those days, you used to do 120 hours a week, and the nurses would bleep you. You had these bleeps, and you were dead on your feet. So there's a bit of a battle between the junior doctors because the nurses did shifts and we didn't. We did literally 120 hours a week. You would work 9 till 5, and then you'd be on call every other night. And you could do a shift going to work at 9 o'clock on Friday morning, and you get off shift 5 o'clock on Monday, and you would work continuously. And then you'd work your normal week. It was just crazy. So, and of course the nurses would have to call you for things. So there's always this, you didn't want to be called. You just wanted to, there was no trouble sleeping. You just were out cold. So one night I got called, a patient had died, and I got called to certify the death. And I was really, really pissed off. I was exhausted. So I thought, I'm going to get my own back. So the curtains were drawn. I go in there. I started going, nurse, quick, this patient's not dead. She goes, It was so cruel. It was so cruel. But I was very young. Got my own back. Anyway, yeah,
right.
Couldn't do that. Now you get thrown out for doing that. But
I bet.
Yeah.
No sense of humor.
And on that note, we'll take a break here on United Planet, and we'll be back in a moment.